What happens when a CEO mocks a woman for doing a man's job, and she ends up teaching his entire company how to do it right? It happened on a Thursday afternoon just outside Toledo, Ohio. The kind of day when the sky can't decide between rain or sun, and the air smells faintly like hot metal and wet asphalt. On a quiet stretch of road, a sleek silver prototype car sat stalled on the shoulder. Its hood popped open, steam curling into the air like a bad omen. Inside that car was Derrick Langston, a man used to being in control, 42 years old, sharp suit, expensive watch, and a face that looked like it hadn't smiled in weeks. He wasn't just anyone. He was the CEO of Langston Automotive Group, a company known for its high-end electric cars and bold, futuristic designs. But right now, his million-dollar prototype was dead silent. "Unbelievable," he muttered, slamming the steering wheel. "This thing is supposed to represent the future, and it can't even make it 10 miles. He got out, checked the engine, and called his team. No one picked up. So, frustrated and sweating through his designer shirt, he pulled out his phone and searched for the nearest repair shop. The closest one was 5 miles away, Brooks Auto Repair. No fancy name, no franchise, just a single building with a corrugated roof and faded blue paint. He sighed. Great. Exactly what I need. A backyard mechanic. When he arrived, the small parking lot was cluttered with pickup trucks, an old Chevy, and what looked like a half-rebuilt motorcycle. The sign over the door was chipped, but the place was alive. The clank of tools, the whir of a power drill, a radio playing old R&B. Derrick stepped inside, ducking slightly as the door chimed. Behind the counter stood Tanya Brooks, a black woman in her early 30s, wearing a dark green jumpsuit with her name stitched on the front. Her curly hair was pulled back and her hands were streaked with grease. She looked up briefly from a carburetor she was working on. "You lost?" she asked, her voice calm, almost amused. Derrick glanced around. "You're the mechanic?" "Last time I checked." She wiped her hands and nodded toward the car outside. "That yours?" He hesitated, eyeing her skeptically. "Yeah, it's complicated. This isn't your average car, it's a prototype. Top of the line. I need someone who knows what they're doing." Tanya's lips curved slightly. "Lucky for you, I do." He chuckled, a little condescendingly. "You sure about that?" She didn't flinch. "Positive. Bring it in." And Derrick hesitated for a moment, scanning the garage. A mix of organized chaos. There were half-dismantled engines, stacked tires, a workbench covered in tools. It wasn't polished, but it was real. Something about the smell of oil and the faint sound of Luther Vandross on the radio made the place feel alive. He finally agreed. "Fine. But just be careful with it. This thing's worth more than most houses." Tanya smirked. "Then I'll treat it better than most people treat their houses." She walked out to the car, her steps confident but unhurried. As she leaned over the open hood, Derrick noticed how focused she became. No hesitation, no small talk, just pure attention to detail. Her hands moved with the certainty of someone who didn't guess. She knew. "So," she said after a minute, "what exactly happened?" "It shut down mid-drive. System failure. The dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree." She tapped the side of the car. "That's not mechanical. That's electronic. Maybe a calibration issue." He frowned. "That's impossible. My engineers miss things sometimes," she interrupted smoothly. "Happens to the best." He didn't like that. Derrick was used to people listening when he talked, not cutting him off. But there was something about her tone, calm but confident, that made him pause. While Tanya hooked up her diagnostic tools, one of her coworkers, a tall guy named Reggie, wandered over. "Yo, Tanya," he said, nodding toward Derrick. "You working on that car?" "Yep." Reggie whistled. "Man, that thing looks like a spaceship." "It's supposed to," Derrick said proudly. "Cutting-edge design. Self-learning. AI system. Costs more than your whole operation here." Reggie raised an eyebrow, but stayed quiet. Tanya shot Derrick a glance that could slice through steel. "I don't care what it costs. If it's broken, it's broken." There was a brief silence before Derrick laughed. Short, sharp, a little arrogant. "All right, Ms. Brooks. Tell you what, if you can fix this thing, I'll marry you." Reggie's eyes widened, and the two younger mechanics nearby burst out laughing. Tanya didn't even blink. "Better hope you brought a tux then," she said flatly, turning back to the engine. The laughter died down quick. Derrick looked slightly taken aback. He wasn't expecting her to fire back like that. You've got some confidence, she shrugged. Confidence gets engines running. Ego just makes noise. He wanted to respond, something witty, something to reassert control. But for once, the words didn't come. As Tanya continued inspecting the car, she noticed a faint ticking sound coming from the converter system. Subtle, but not normal. She crouched lower, eyes narrowing. The CEO hovered nearby, arms crossed, impatient. You're gonna stand there the whole time? She asked without looking up. I just want to make sure that I don't mess up. Yeah, I figured. The corner of Derrick's mouth twitched. You always this blunt? Only when someone underestimates me before I've even picked up a wrench. He went quiet. For the first time, he didn't feel like the one with the upper hand. Minutes stretched into an hour. Tanya moved methodically, scanning data on her tablet, tracing wires, jotting notes on a grease-stained pad. Derrick watched her, a mix of curiosity and annoyance swirling in his chest. He'd met dozens of engineers in tailored suits, but none of them worked with this kind of focus. Outside, the sun began to dip, and the shop's fluorescent lights flickered on. Reggie leaned against the doorframe, whispering to a coworker, "You think she's actually gonna fix it?" The other guy grinned. "Man, this is Tanya. She can fix a lawnmower," with a paperclip Derrick overheard and rolled his eyes, but deep down, he was starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he'd misjudged her. But the truth was, Tanya wasn't just fixing an engine. She was about to teach a man who had everything what humility really looked like. Derrick Langston leaned against the wall, arms folded tight, his jaw set like concrete. He wasn't used to waiting, and certainly not in a small-town garage with oil-stained floors and country radio playing in the background. Every so often, Tanya Brooks glanced up from the car, then back down, calm, methodical. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just doing her job. But for Derrick, every passing minute felt like a test of patience. "You know," he finally said, "back at Langston Automotive, we have whole teams of engineers for this sort of thing. Software guys, hardware specialists, prototype consultants. You think you can find something they missed?" Tanya didn't even look at him. Wouldn't be the first time. Her tone was even, but her confidence stung a little. Derrick wasn't used to that, especially from someone outside his corporate circle. He shifted uncomfortably, his pride starting to itch. He cleared his throat. "This car runs on a dual-core AI calibration system. It's way beyond basic mechanics." "Then it shouldn't be broken," she replied without missing a beat. Reggie let out a low laugh from across the shop. "She got you there, boss man." Derrick glared at him, but Reggie just grinned and went back to sorting parts. Tanya's hands were steady, moving across the wiring with precision. She disconnected a few components, checked readings, then plugged them back in. After a few moments, she asked, "You said it shut down mid-drive?" "Yeah," he said. "I was on Route 24, maybe 10 miles out. Everything just stopped. No warning. Any error codes?" "5, Derrick replied, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "All different. My engineer said it was probably a voltage issue." Tanya frowned. "Voltage doesn't trigger 5 different errors. That's a software loop or a feedback problem," Derrick squinted. "How would you even know that?" She looked up, locking eyes with him. "Because I've seen this kind of failure before. Just not in $1 million car." Her words hung in the air. The shop went quiet except for the faint rattle of a wrench on the workbench. Derrick didn't know how to respond. She continued, "You see, I used to work at an auto plant in Detroit. Assembly line diagnostics. Spent 7 years running error tests for vehicles before they hit production. Then one day, they let a batch go through with a faulty algorithm in the calibration system. I caught it. Management ignored me." "What happened?" Derrick asked, curiosity softening his tone. "They recalled over 2,000 cars 6 months later, cost them millions." She straightened, wiping her hands. "I got laid off before that. Guess I made too much noise." He blinked. For the first time, Derrick didn't see just a mechanic. He saw someone who'd been through the system, someone who'd fought to prove herself and got burned for it. But he wasn't ready to admit that out loud. Not yet. "So, what are you doing here in a small garage?" he asked, almost skeptically. Tanya shrugged. Fixing what other people overlook. That answer stuck with him more than he cared to admit. A few minutes later, the sound of a truck pulling up broke the silence. An older man stepped out, Frank Dorsey, one of the local farmers who came by often for maintenance. He waved as he entered. "Hey, Tanya, you got a minute?" "Not right now, Frank," she called out. "Got a CEO breathing down my neck." Frank chuckled, looking over at Derrick. "A CEO, huh? What's a suit like you doing in our little shop?" "Apparently waiting to be impressed," Derrick muttered. Tanya smirked, but kept her eyes on the car. "Careful, you might be." Frank laughed, slapped the counter, and left, mumbling something about city folks learning lessons. Derrick sighed, glancing around the shop. He noticed a photo pinned to the wall. A younger Tanya, maybe in her early 20s, standing next to an old Camaro. Her smile was genuine, her eyes proud. Beneath it, a quote written in marker. "You don't earn respect by talking about what you can do. You earn it by doing it." He read it twice. Something about it made him uneasy, like it was directed straight at him. Finally, he broke the silence again. "You really think you can fix this thing?" Tanya stood up, wiping her hands with a rag. "No," she said simply. "I know I can." That confidence, that quiet certainty, rubbed him the wrong way, but also intrigued him. It wasn't arrogance. It was truth. He laughed sarcastically, trying to shake off his discomfort. "You've got guts, I'll give you that." She turned, crossing her arms. "You think it's guts because you've never had to work twice as hard to be taken seriously." Derrick blinked, caught off guard by how direct she was. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Guys like you walk into a room and people assume you're competent. I walk into one and they assume I'm lucky to be there. So yeah, I've got guts. Because I have to." Reggie whistled under his breath. "She's not wrong." Derrick exhaled slowly, looking away. The truth stung, but he couldn't argue it. "You really don't hold back, do you?" "Nope," Tanya said. Holding back never fixed an engine. The next half hour passed in tense silence. She typed a few commands into her tablet, her brow furrowed. Then she looked up and said, "There's something wrong with your AI feedback module. Whoever programmed it left a redundancy loop. It keeps sending error codes until the system shuts itself down." Derrick frowned. "That's not possible. My chief engineer is one of the best in the country." "Maybe so," she replied, "but your best missed something your mechanic found in 30 minutes. Reggie snickered. Derrick glared. Tanya didn't even smile. He rubbed his temples. "Fine. If you're right, prove it. I plan to." She grabbed her laptop, connected it to the diagnostic port, and began typing quickly. The sound of keys clicking filled the space. The lights on the car's console blinked erratically, then settled. Tanya exhaled, focused, but calm. Derrick stepped closer, watching her hands move, precise, deliberate. She wasn't guessing. She knew exactly what she was doing. Finally, he said, "You really think you can outsmart my engineers?" Tanya looked up. "I don't need to outsmart them. I just need to see what they missed." Her voice was steady, and it made him quiet. He'd never met anyone who could cut through his arrogance like that, especially in a garage that smelled like oil and sweat. But as the car's console flickered again, and the faint sound of the engine trying to start echoed through the shop, Derrick's smirk returned. "Tell you what," he said loudly, catching everyone's attention, "if you actually get this thing running, I'll keep my word." Tanya raised an eyebrow. "Your word?" He grinned. "Yeah, the whole 'I'll marry you' thing. Let's make it official." Reggie and the others laughed, shaking their heads. Tanya stared at Derrick for a long moment, then said, "Careful what you promise, Mr. CEO. You might end up keeping it." Her tone wasn't flirty. It was steady, warning him that she took challenges seriously. Derrick folded his arms, still wearing that smug look. "We'll see." Tanya turned back to the car. "Yeah," she said quietly. "You will." But what Derrick didn't know was that by morning, she'd make him eat every word. The shop quieted down as evening rolled in. The last customers left, and the only sound was the faint ticking of the overhead clock and Tanya's steady rhythm. Socket wrench, clink, scribble, tap. The silver prototype sat on the lift like a patient on an operating table. Reggie stretched his arms. "You really gonna stay all night with this thing?" Tanya didn't look up. "Yeah." I want to see what's going on with its onboard systems. Reggie chuckled, shaking his head. You're something else. I'm clocking out before that thing starts talking back. Go ahead, she said, smiling faintly. I got it. As Reggie left, Derrick stayed, leaning on a stool, scrolling through his phone, pretending to be bored. But he wasn't. He was watching her. The way she moved, the way her eyes scanned each line of code, how she didn't waste a single motion. He cleared his throat. You sure you don't want help? I could call one of my techs. They could walk you through the architecture. I don't need a map to find my way, Tanya replied. That's not what I... She glanced at him. Yeah, it is. He sighed, setting his phone down. You always like this? Like what? So confident. Like you've got something to prove. Tanya stopped typing, her shoulders stiffening for a second. I stopped trying to prove myself a long time ago, she said. Now I just fix what's broken. That's enough. Derrick tilted his head. You don't strike me as someone who settled. I didn't settle. I adapted. He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? She let out a soft laugh. It means when doors don't open for you, you build your own damn garage. That shut him up. For the first time, Derrick wasn't sure if he admired her or felt called out. Maybe both. The lights above flickered as the storm outside rolled in, tapping against the roof. Tanya adjusted the sensors and plugged her tablet into the car's core system. On her screen, lines of diagnostic data scrolled fast. Temperature logs, pressure readings, software flags. She muttered to herself, There you are. Come on, talk to me. What? Derrick asked. Your calibration system's caught in a loop. Whoever programmed this forgot to write a reset condition. So every time the AI tries to correct itself, it doubles back, like chasing its own tail. He frowned. That doesn't make sense. We ran dozens of simulations. And not one of you actually tested it on the road, she said. You trusted your software too much. The truth hit him harder than he wanted to admit. Tanya cracked her knuckles and got to work. Her laptop screen reflected in her eyes as she typed fast, rewriting lines of code, disabling sensors, reconfiguring input parameters. The air smelled faintly like ozone and rubber. Derrick found himself leaning closer without realizing it. You always this focused? He asked quietly. Tanya didn't answer right away. My dad used to say, if you're not paying attention, the car will tell on you. Your dad was a mechanic too? She smiled softly. Yeah, he ran a little shop out in Flint. Used to fix cars after his factory shifts. He taught me how to pull an alternator before I learned multiplication. That explains a lot, Derrick said. You got it in your blood. Guess so. He passed away a few years ago, though, heart attack. I took over what was left of his tools and kept going. Haven't stopped since. He nodded slowly, watching her hands move again. Something about that story settled in his chest like a weight. He'd be proud. Tanya gave a small smile but didn't look up. He'd probably tell me I'm charging too little. Derrick chuckled quietly, and for the first time that night, there was no tension in his voice. Just something human. Hours passed. The rain eased, the night deepened. Tanya wiped her forehead, left a streak of grease, then crouched to check under the hood again. Derrick offered her a water bottle. She hesitated, then took it. You ever think about working in a big company? He asked. No, she said flatly. Why not? Because I've seen how they treat people like me. He blinked, unsure how to respond. People like you? Women who don't fit the mold, especially black women. You have to be perfect just to be considered average. And even then, they still doubt you. Her tone wasn't bitter, it was calm. The kind of calm that comes after years of fighting the same battle. Derrick's gaze dropped. He'd been in those boardrooms. He'd seen how easily women's voices were ignored, dismissed, or talked over, and he'd done nothing about it. He took a breath. Maybe it doesn't have to be that way. Maybe, she said, but it usually is. Silence settled between them again, the kind that feels like truth instead of awkwardness. Tanya glanced at the screen, typed one last line of code, and pressed enter. The car's console lights flickered, blinked once, then twice, and went still. She exhaled. Okay, that's either good news or really bad news. Derrick leaned forward. Which one is it? We'll see. She adjusted a wire, turned the key in the ignition, and waited. The engine clicked, coughed, then fell silent again. Derrick shook his head. Guess it's not that simple after all. Nothing worth doing ever is, she murmured. She climbed into the driver's seat and began scrolling through the digital display. Her fingers moved like a pianist's, quick, deliberate. She reset the circuit manually, ran a fresh diagnostic, then turned the key again. This time, the dashboard lit up clean. No red warning lights, no error codes, just a smooth blue glow. Derrick's eyebrows rose. That's new. Tanya didn't celebrate yet. She listened closely. Do you hear that? Hear what? The silence. That's how I know it's right. When a car stops complaining, it's finally talking the way it should. Derrick stared at her, momentarily speechless. He'd met engineers who could build cars, but Tanya understood them. The rain stopped. The clock read 10:47 p.m. Tanya stepped out of the car, wiping her hands. All right, Mr. CEO, we're about halfway there. Halfway, he asked. Yeah, the software's fixed, but now I need to make sure it wasn't masking a physical fault. You mind staying a little longer? He looked at his watch. I guess I don't have much choice. You always have a choice, she said, smirking. Just depends if you want to leave here tonight or tomorrow. He laughed under his breath. Fine. Do your thing, Brooks. She turned back to the car, connecting new cables. Don't worry, I plan to. Derrick leaned back on the stool, watching her again, realizing, for the first time, that this woman wasn't just fixing his car. She was challenging everything he thought he knew about power, pride, and respect. But as the first spark caught in the engine, he had no idea that by dawn, he wouldn't just owe her an apology. He'd owe her everything. By midnight, the rain had stopped completely, leaving the pavement slick and the air cool. The shop smelled of oil, coffee, and something electric. That faint metallic scent that comes when machines start to come back to life. Tanya stood with her arms crossed, eyes fixed on the laptop screen as data scrolled by. Derrick had stopped pretending to be bored hours ago. Now he was pacing, watching every move she made. How long does it take to know if it's fixed? He asked, trying to sound casual. As long as it takes to do it right, Tanya replied without looking up. You like keeping people in suspense, don't you? No, she said flatly. I like keeping cars from exploding. That shut him up. She connected one last cable, tightened a bolt, and motioned toward the ignition. All right. Moment of truth. Turn it. Derrick hesitated. You sure? Tanya raised an eyebrow. You said you wanted results. Go ahead. He slid into the driver's seat, still skeptical, and turned the key. The engine sputtered, clicked twice, and then roared to life with a deep, steady hum that filled the entire garage. Tanya's face stayed calm, but her eyes lit up for a brief second. Derrick froze, staring at the dashboard. No warning lights, no error codes. Everything glowed clean and balanced. He slowly stepped out of the car. You've got to be kidding me. Tanya wiped her hands on a rag. Told you it was a feedback loop. Derrick walked around the car, half in disbelief, half in awe. You mean to tell me my entire team of engineers missed this? Looks like it, she said, tucking the rag into her pocket. He shook his head, laughing under his breath. Unbelievable. You actually did it. The sound of the engine filled the space like a heartbeat, strong, alive, and smooth. Reggie, who had wandered back in after hearing the noise from the street, froze at the door. Yo, you got it running? He shouted. Tanya pointed toward Derrick. He did the honors. Reggie's mouth fell open. No way. That thing was dead. Not anymore, Tanya said. Reggie whooped, smacking the doorframe. You're a magician, girl. Derrick crossed his arms, trying to hide his embarrassment. Guess I underestimated you. Tanya turned toward him, her expression unreadable. Guess so? He hesitated, then said quietly, You know, I didn't actually think you'd fix it. I know, she said. You made that pretty clear. He exhaled, stepping closer. You didn't have to prove anything. She met his eyes. Wasn't proving anything to you. For a second, the room felt heavier, like there was more being said than either of them wanted to admit, the kind of silence that only happens when pride meets truth. Derrick looked down, running a hand through his hair. You ever think about what you just did? You fixed something no one else could. That's not luck. I don't believe in luck, Tanya said. I believe in skill and work, and the fact that sometimes the people who talk the loudest aren't the ones who know the most. Reggie laughed from the corner. Ain't that the truth? Derrick glanced over at him, then back at Tanya. You always this direct? Only when people earn it. He smiled a little. Well, I guess I earned it tonight. Guess you did, she said, finally letting out a soft laugh. Congratulations. Your $1 million car lives to see another day. They stood there for a moment, the sound of the engine humming in the background like a quiet victory song. Derrick reached out a hand, something he didn't do often. Tanya looked at it, then shook it. Her grip was firm, confident. Thank you, he said simply. You're welcome. That'll be 20 grand. He blinked. Wait, what? She grinned. You said it yourself. This car's worth more than most houses. I charge accordingly. He laughed, the tension finally breaking. All right. You drive a hard bargain. I fix harder engines, she replied, turning back to her workbench. He watched her for a moment longer, his pride giving way to genuine admiration. There was something about her, something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't just skill, it was conviction. Listen, he said finally, I'd like to show my team what you did. They could learn something from you. Tanya looked over her shoulder. Your team? The ones who designed it wrong? Exactly, he said. You'd be surprised how much they think they know. She paused, clearly considering it. You want me to go to your company? He nodded. Langston Automotive, downtown Detroit, just one day. Walk them through what happened. Her face was unreadable. You want me to teach your engineers? More like, remind them what real skill looks like. She chuckled. You sure they'll listen to me? They'll have to, Derrick said. They don't have a choice. Tanya stared at him, gauging if this was another setup, another joke, but there was something different in his voice now, a kind of respect she hadn't heard before. I'll think about it, she said finally. Fair enough, he replied, but I'll tell you right now, they won't forget you. She turned back to the car, tapping the hood lightly. Neither will you, Mr. Langston. He smiled faintly. No, I don't think I will. The engine idled softly, its sound echoing through the small shop. The storm clouds outside had cleared, and moonlight filtered through the dusty windows. For the first time that night, Derrick felt something strange. Not victory, not relief, but humility. He'd walked in here expecting to laugh at a small-town mechanic. He was leaving with a lesson that would stick with him far longer than the drive back to Detroit. As he turned to leave, Tanya called after him, Hey, Langston! He looked back. Next time you make a bet like that, she said with a smirk, make sure you're ready to keep it. He laughed, shaking his head. We'll see, Brooks. We'll see. But the truth was, Derrick didn't drive home that night thinking about his prototype. He drove home thinking about her, and by morning he'd already made up his mind about what he needed to do next. The next morning, the city skyline was washed clean from the night's storm. Derrick Langston sat in his office on the 22nd floor of Langston Automotive's headquarters in downtown Detroit, staring at the silver prototype through the glass wall of the testing bay below. It purred like a dream, flawless, efficient, alive. His engineers stood around it, scratching their heads as they reviewed Tanya Brooks's diagnostic notes. Most of them looked confused, a few looked embarrassed, and one or two quietly muttered that her fix shouldn't have worked, even though it clearly did. Derrick leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Grease-streaked hands, calm voice, steady eyes that didn't flinch when he doubted her. Sir, a voice interrupted. It was Alicia Grant, his executive assistant. Young, sharp, always composed. The team's waiting for your debrief. Do you want to address them now? He glanced down at the car again. No, not yet. I need to make a call first. She raised an eyebrow. To who? He smirked. The woman who fixed what they couldn't. At that same moment, in a small shop off Highway 24, Tanya Brooks was under the hood of a rusted Ford pickup, humming to herself. The morning light filtered through the garage windows, dust catching in the air. Reggie strolled in with a cup of coffee in one hand and a newspaper in the other. You see this? He said, waving the paper. Langston Automotive's making headlines. Says their prototype's back up and running after a mystery software glitch. Tanya didn't even look up. Let me guess. They took the credit. Reggie grinned. Oh, you already know. She laughed quietly, tightening a bolt. I didn't fix it for credit. I fixed it because it was broken. That's the thing about you, Reggie said. You don't even realize how rare that is. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. She wiped her hands on a rag and picked it up. Brooks Auto. Morning, Ms. Brooks, came Derrick's voice, smooth but careful. Hope I'm not interrupting your busy schedule. Tanya smirked. You're calling early for a man who doesn't like being humbled. He chuckled. Touché. Listen, I meant what I said last night. I'd like you to come to Langston Automotive today. Meet the team. Walk them through what you did. She hesitated. You serious? Completely. There was a long pause. You really think your people want to take orders from a small-town mechanic? I don't want you to give them orders, he said. I want them to see what they missed. There's a difference, Tanya leaned against the counter, thinking it over. I'll come. But I'm not dressing up. Wouldn't expect you to, he said. She smiled faintly. All right then. Text me the address. Derrick exhaled in relief. You won't regret it. I'll be the judge of that, she replied and hung up. Reggie raised his eyebrows. Was that who I think it was? Yep. And you're actually going? Yeah. Girl, you're about to walk into the lion's den. She shrugged. Good thing I'm not afraid of lions. By noon, Tanya was driving into downtown Detroit in her old blue pickup, the sound of the engine rumbling low and steady. Her jumpsuit was clean, but her hands still bore faint traces of grease. She parked right in front of Langston Automotive's glass tower, the kind of building that looked like it cost more to clean than her shop made in a year. People in suits walked by, giving her curious looks. One man in a tailored jacket even muttered something under his breath about delivery staff using the front entrance. Tanya ignored it. She'd heard worse. Inside the lobby, she approached the front desk. Tanya Brooks. Mr. Langston's expecting me. The receptionist blinked, surprised, then checked her list. Oh, yes, ma'am. He asked me to bring you straight up. Tanya followed her to the elevator, the air thick with that sterile scent of corporate polish and recycled air. She caught her reflection in the mirror. Simple jumpsuit, worn boots, hair tied back. She looked exactly like herself, and that made her smile. When the elevator doors opened, Derrick was waiting. He looked different today, less polished, more thoughtful. Tanya, he said warmly, glad you made it. Couldn't resist the chance to watch some engineers squirm, she said. He laughed. They're already squirming. As they walked through the glass corridor, Tanya looked around, white walls, steel desks, sleek prototypes under bright lights. Everything was clean, perfect, and quiet. Too quiet. You ever get tired of how sterile this place feels? She asked. Derrick looked around. It's efficient. It's cold, she countered. Machines don't like cold. They like warmth, motion, life. He smiled slightly. You talk about engines like they're people. They are, in a way, she said. You take care of them, they take care of you. When they entered the lab, the chatter stopped. A dozen engineers looked up from their stations, confusion spreading across their faces. One of them, a tall man with wireframe glasses, frowned. Mr. Langston, he said, is this our guest? Yes, Derrick said. This is Tanya Brooks, the mechanic who fixed the prototype. The room fell silent. You could practically hear the skepticism. Another engineer, a younger woman with a clipboard, forced a polite smile. No offense, ma'am, but you must have had some help, right? Tanya just grinned. No offense taken. But no, I did it myself. Derrick folded his arms. She found a software redundancy loop none of you caught. The older engineer frowned. That's impossible. Tanya stepped forward. So was the car starting last night? But it did. A few of them exchanged looks. One muttered under his breath, probably luck. Tanya caught it and smiled coolly. Funny thing about luck, it looks a lot like skill when you don't understand it. Even Derrick had to suppress a grin. She's here to show you what you missed. So take notes. The engineers reluctantly gathered around as Tanya pulled up the system diagnostics on the large screen. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, her voice steady as she explained the issue. Clear, concise, and impossible to argue with. One by one, their expressions changed from skeptical to stunned. When she finished, Derrick clapped lightly. Any questions? No one spoke. Tanya turned to the group. Here's something you should remember. Experience doesn't always come from a degree. Sometimes it comes from years of dirty hands and stubborn engines that refuse to quit. The room stayed quiet, but Derrick saw something shift. A glimmer of respect. As Tanya unplugged the system, she looked at him and said, "Well, that was fun." He smiled. "You sure know how to command a room." She shrugged. "I don't command. I just tell the truth." But what Tanya didn't know was that her visit wasn't just about a demonstration. Derrick had a far bigger plan waiting for her. And by the time the day ended, her life would never look the same again. The conference room at Langston Automotive was a glass box with a perfect view of downtown Detroit. The city stretched endlessly below, gray towers, flashing billboards, and the steady crawl of traffic. Inside, though, you could cut the air with a wrench. Tanya Brooks sat at one end of a long, polished table, her jumpsuit creased but clean, a cup of untouched coffee sitting in front of her. On the opposite side sat Derrick Langston and 5 of his senior engineers, all in tailored suits, all watching her like she'd walked into the wrong room. Derrick stood at the head of the table, calm but alert. "All right, everyone. You've all seen the data from the prototype. Tanya here found and fixed a critical feedback loop that caused the system shut down." The lead engineer, Calvin Brandt, a man in his 50s with graying hair and a habit of tapping his pen, leaned forward. "With all due respect, Mr. Langston, there's no way a single person caught that. Our systems passed every layer of testing." Tanya crossed her arms. "Then explain why it broke down." Calvin frowned. "There could have been an environmental anomaly." "There wasn't," she interrupted. "I checked. The software was chasing its own correction data. I ran a manual recalibration and removed the recursive loop." Calvin gave a short laugh. "That's not possible. You'd need access to our developer console, which is encrypted." Tanya's eyes flicked to Derrick. "You mean that console?" Derrick hid a smile. "She used the prototype's direct port. Didn't need your encryption." The room went quiet. Calvin's jaw tightened. "That's highly irregular." "So is your coding," Tanya shot back. A few of the younger engineers coughed, trying to hide their laughter. Derrick held up a hand. "All right, let's stay focused. Tanya's here because I asked her to be. We're not here to defend mistakes. We're here to learn from them." Calvin sat back, clearly irritated. "Learn from a mechanic?" That word, mechanic, hung heavy in the room. Tanya leaned forward, her tone calm but sharp. "You say that like it's an insult." He blinked. "It's not." "It is," she said. "But that's okay. You build cars on screens. I build them with my hands. You work from blueprints. I work from what's broken. We're not the same, but we both get results." The silence that followed wasn't polite. It was stunned. Derrick couldn't help himself. He smiled. Tanya wasn't just standing her ground. She was winning. After a pause, he said, "Calvin, pull up the engine's live data feed." Calvin sighed, typing reluctantly on his laptop. The screen on the wall filled with numbers, pressure charts, and feedback graphs. Tanya stood, walked around the table, and pointed to a cluster of fluctuating readings. "Right there. You see that oscillation?" Calvin squinted. "It's within tolerance." "For now," Tanya said, "but that's the same kind of inconsistency that caused the loop in the first place. You've got crosstalk between your voltage regulator and the AI's correction feedback." He frowned. "That's not possible." "It is, if your signal's bouncing between unshielded conductors," she said. "You designed the system to talk too much. It's overcorrecting because it doesn't trust its own sensors." The entire table went quiet again. Tanya looked up. "You built a machine that doesn't believe itself." That line hit everyone at once. Even Derrick felt it in his chest. For a long moment, nobody said a word. Then Calvin finally muttered, "You know, that's actually a valid point." Derrick smirked. "You think?" Tanya stepped back. "You want that car to run like it's supposed to? You need to stop making it second-guess itself. Machines are like people. If you don't give them room to work, they break down under pressure." The young woman with the clipboard from earlier, Hannah Lee, spoke up softly. "That's a really good way to put it." "Thanks," Tanya said. "I try to make things simple." Derrick crossed his arms, pride showing just a little. Simple doesn't mean small, folks. It means it works. One of the engineers raised a tentative hand. Ms. Brooks, could you walk us through the manual reset you did? I'd like to replicate it. Tanya smiled. Sure, but don't blink. I move fast. The room eased up as she took over the big screen, showing her steps, her logic, her process. She wasn't flashy about it. She didn't brag. She just knew. By the time she was done, even Calvin looked impressed, though he tried not to show it. When the session ended, Derrick turned to the group. Let's give Tanya a round of applause. She just saved us about 6 months of debugging. There was a beat, then polite, and then genuine applause filled the room. Tanya exhaled quietly, offering a small smile. Appreciate it. As the engineers filed out, Derrick lingered by the window watching her. You handled that like a pro. She gave a modest shrug. I handle engines. People are trickier. He chuckled. You did more than handle them. You made them listen. She smirked. Yeah, well, they weren't the first group of guys to think I didn't belong. He nodded slowly. I know that feeling. Different reasons, maybe, but I get it. Tanya looked at him curiously. You? Mr. Corporate? Yeah, he said. When I started this company, people thought I was too young, too bold, too stubborn. They laughed at me in meetings, so I stopped talking and started showing results. Tanya smiled faintly. Guess we've both had something to prove. Maybe, he said, but I think you're done proving. Now you teach. She tilted her head. Teach? He looked serious now. I meant what I said before. I want you to come on board. Consultant, advisor, whatever title you want. I'll pay you double what you make at your shop. Tanya blinked. Double? Triple, if you stick around for more than 6 months. She laughed softly, shaking her head. You're serious. Dead serious, Derrick said. You've got something we can't buy. Instinct. I can train people to code. I can't train them to understand. For a long time, she didn't answer. She just stared out the window at the city, the kind of view her father used to talk about when he said success looked different depending on who was looking. Finally, she said, You really want someone like me walking around here? Derrick smiled. I need someone like you walking around here. She let out a breath, still unsure. I'll think about it. That's fair, he said. Take your time. But I hope you say yes. He handed her a business card with his direct number, and for the first time since she met him, there was no arrogance in his eyes, just respect. As she slipped the card into her pocket, she said quietly, You're a strange man, Langston. I've been called worse, he said, smiling. But as Tanya left that glass tower and drove home, she didn't know that her decision in the next few days would change not just her life, but Derrick's company forever. The next few days rolled by quietly. Tanya went back to her small garage on the edge of Toledo, trying to convince herself nothing had changed. But it had. The Langston job offer sat on her counter next to her coffee mug, the business card like a challenge she didn't ask for. Reggie kept staring at it every time he walked by. You're really not going to call him? He asked for the 3rd time that morning. Tanya looked up from the engine she was tuning. I said I'd think about it. He grinned. You've been thinking about it for 4 days. That's a record even for you. She rolled her eyes. You know how I feel about suits and boardrooms? Yeah, he said, but this isn't just some office job. This is your chance to show them what you're made of. From the inside, Tanya tightened a bolt, her hands steady but her expression thoughtful. I don't need a fancy job to prove anything, Reggie. I'm not saying you do, he said, but maybe this isn't about proving. Maybe it's about changing things. She froze at that. Changing things? Yeah, he said. You walk into that place as yourself, a black woman in a jumpsuit who knows more about engines than their whole tech team combined. You change the picture of what qualified looks like. Tanya didn't answer. She didn't need to. The thought stuck with her the rest of the day. That evening, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Derrick. Hope the week's treating you well. No pressure, sir, but if you want to stop by the factory tomorrow, I'll be there personally. You might like what we're working on. She read it twice, then sighed. That man doesn't give up, she muttered. Reggie leaned on the doorframe. So? She exhaled, setting down her wrench. Guess I'll see what he's got to say. The next morning, Tanya pulled up to Langston Automotive again, but this time she didn't park in the visitor's lot. She parked right next to Derrick's car, the same prototype she'd fixed. The security guard started to object, but Derrick appeared at the door, waving her through with a grin. "You came," he said. "Don't make a big deal out of it," she said, climbing out. "You said there was something I might like." He nodded toward the production floor. "Come on." They walked side by side through rows of machinery and half-assembled vehicles. The space was louder today, full of motion and chatter. Workers looked up as they passed, some recognizing Tanya from the stories that had been floating around the plant all week. Derrick stopped in front of a workstation where two engineers were installing a new AI module. "This is the next prototype, the one that's going to replace the model you fixed." Tanya leaned closer. "Looks sleek. What's different about it?" He gestured to the open display. "You tell me." She studied the schematics for a moment, then frowned. "You're using a dual feedback loop again." He smiled. "Good catch. That's what I was hoping you'd say." She turned to him. "So you want me to tell you what's wrong before it breaks?" "Exactly," he said. "But not as a consultant. As a partner." Tanya blinked. "Partner?" "I'm offering you part ownership of our new diagnostic division," Derrick said. "You'll lead the team. Set the standards. Train people who actually know how to listen to machines." She stared at him. "You can't be serious." "I'm dead serious," he said. "This company needs you. Not as a token, not as a PR story, but as the person who's going to make sure we stop missing what's right in front of us." For once, Tanya didn't have a quick comeback. She looked down at her hands, still stained faintly with oil, and then at the spotless floor beneath her boots. "Derrick," she said slowly, "I don't belong here. I'm not polished. I don't have the degrees. I'm not one of your suits." He stepped closer. "Exactly why you belong here. You see things they don't. You come from where the work actually happens." She looked up at him. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you reminded me of who I was before all this," he said quietly. "Before I got comfortable. Before I started thinking success meant forgetting where I came from." Tanya studied him, searching his face for a trace of condescension, arrogance, anything fake. But there wasn't any. He meant every word. She folded her arms. "You realize if I say yes, I'm not changing who I am. I'm not swapping my jumpsuit for a blazer." He smiled. "Good. We have enough blazers." Tanya laughed softly, shaking her head. "You're something else." "I'll take that as a yes?" he asked hopefully. She hesitated. "You'll take it as a maybe?" He grinned. "I'll take it." By the end of the day, Tanya found herself back at the conference table, this time surrounded by engineers who looked at her differently. The skepticism was gone. Instead, there was curiosity, respect. Hannah, the younger engineer, approached her after the meeting. "I just wanted to say what you said last time about machines needing room to work. That stuck with me." Tanya smiled. "Good. It's not just machines either," Hannah nodded. "Yeah, I know Derrick watched from a distance, seeing how naturally Tanya commanded attention without ever trying to. It wasn't charisma, it was honesty." Later, as they walked out together, he said, "You know, my engineers are already quoting you." "Quoting me?" She laughed. "What, about engines talking back?" "Exactly that," she chuckled. "Guess I'm contagious." Derrick looked at her for a moment, then said softly, "You changed something here. You know that, right?" She glanced at him. "Maybe a little?" "No," he said. "A lot." They stopped by the same prototype she'd fixed a week earlier. It gleamed under the lights, perfect now. Derrick ran his hand along the hood. "I was wrong about you, Tanya." "Yeah," she said. "You were." He smiled. "Glad I was." For a brief moment, the noise of the factory faded. There was only the two of them, a man who'd learned humility and a woman who'd earned every ounce of it. "You still remember what you said that night?" she asked suddenly. Derrick frowned. "What part?" "The part about marrying me if I fixed your car." He laughed, a little embarrassed. "You're not going to let me live that down, are you?" "Not a chance," she said with a grin. They shared a quiet laugh, the kind that sits halfway between humor and history. Two people who'd started as opposites and ended up teaching each other something real. But Tanya's story wasn't finished, because what began as a joke in a greasy garage was about to become something that would inspire thousands of people who'd been told they weren't good enough. A month later, the sign outside the Langston Automotive Research Building had changed. Under the company's name, in clean new lettering, were 3 words that hadn't been there before: Diagnostic Innovation Division. Inside, Tanya Brooks stood in front of a small crowd: engineers, mechanics, and interns. Some wore suits, others overalls. Derrick stood at the back, quietly smiling. Tanya adjusted the mic. When I started out, I didn't think I'd ever see a room like this, where people who build cars and people who fix them could stand in the same space, learning from each other. She paused, scanning the faces. For a long time, folks like me, folks with dirty hands, were told we didn't belong in rooms like this. We were told we weren't qualified. But the truth is, experience doesn't always come with a degree. Sometimes it comes from failure and stubbornness and a whole lot of grease under your nails. A few people chuckled softly. Even Calvin, the once skeptical engineer, cracked a smile. Tanya continued, "When I fixed that prototype a while back, I didn't do it to prove anything. I did it because something was broken. And fixing broken things is what I do. But that moment made me realize something bigger. It's not about proving you belong. It's about showing up and doing the work, even when no one believes you can." The room went silent. Her voice was calm, steady, the same tone she'd used when she faced Derrick that first day. "Every one of us," she said, "has something we're good at. But too often, we hide it because someone told us we weren't supposed to be there. I learned that you can't wait for permission to be great. You just have to get to work." Derrick clapped first, then the rest followed. Loud, genuine applause that filled the space. Tanya smiled, a little embarrassed but proud. When the crowd dispersed, Derrick walked up to her. "You handled that like you've been giving speeches your whole life. Guess I picked up a few things watching you talk," she said. He laughed. "Then I'm honored." She crossed her arms. "So what's next, Mr. Langston?" He shrugged. "You tell me, Miss Brooks. You're running the division now." "Still feels strange hearing that," she admitted. "You earned it." She glanced out the window, watching a group of new hires walking into the workshop. Men and women of every background, chatting and laughing. "Feels like we started something different here." "That was the point," Derrick said. "You showed me the building. Cars isn't just about technology. It's about people. About trust. About who gets the chance to be heard." Tanya smiled. "Not bad for a CEO who once thought he knew everything." He chuckled. "Yeah, I had to get humbled by a mechanic to figure it out." She grinned. "You're welcome." That afternoon, Tanya visited her old shop. Reggie was wiping down a counter when she walked in. "Look at you," he said, grinning. "All corporate and important now." "Don't start," she said, laughing. "I still got grease on my hands." "Yeah, but now the grease comes with stock options." She threw a rag at him. "Stop it." Reggie caught it midair. "So, how's it feel, running your own division?" Tanya leaned against the workbench, thinking. "Honestly, it feels right. Not because of the title, but because now there's someone in those rooms who remembers what it's like to be out here." Reggie nodded. "You changed more than just a company, T. You changed the way people see you." She smiled softly. "I didn't set out to change anyone. I just refused to let them define me." They stood there in the quiet of the garage, the same smell of oil and metal, the same flickering light above the workbench. The world had changed around her, but this place still felt like home. Before she left, Tanya looked around the shop one last time. "You know," she said, "when Derrick first walked in here, I thought he was just another suit with an ego." Reggie grinned. "And now?" "Now he's still got an ego," she said, laughing, "but at least he listens." A few weeks later, Langston Automotive made headlines again. Not for a recall, not for a prototype failure, but for something different. CEO partners with local mechanic to lead innovation division focused on hands-on engineering. The photo showed Derrick and Tanya standing side by side in the factory, both smiling, both proud. Underneath the article, a quote from Tanya read, "Don't let where you start decide where you end up. Respect is earned in what you do, not what you wear." It spread fast. People across the country shared it. Young women who'd been told they didn't belong in technical fields wrote her messages. Mechanics from small towns sent photos of their shops saying, "You made us proud." Tanya never replied to all of them. There were too many. But she read every single one. And sometimes, late at night, she'd walk through the Langston factory floor, the hum of machines steady around her, and think about her father, about the nights she spent fixing cars by lamplight. She whispered once, quietly to herself, "We did it, Dad." The next morning, Derrick found her standing by the new prototype, the one they'd designed together. It was perfect, sleek, efficient, alive. He stood beside her. "You ready for the test drive?" Tanya smirked. "You sure you want to make another bet?" He grinned. "Not unless I'm ready to lose again." She laughed, climbing into the driver's seat. "Good answer." The doors closed and the engine came to life, smooth and powerful, just like before. As they rolled out of the factory, Derrick looked over at her. "You ever think how crazy this all started?" Tanya smiled. "Yeah, one man's bad joke turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to both of us." He nodded. "Yeah, it did." They drove into the morning light, the road stretching open ahead. Two people who started from opposite worlds but met in the middle, proving that respect doesn't care about background, money, or titles. It cares about truth. This story reminds us that talent can come from anywhere, and that real change happens when we stop underestimating people who don't fit our expectations. Whether you're in a garage or a glass tower, what matters isn't what you wear, it's what you bring to the table. So the next time someone doubts you, let your work speak louder than their words, because when you do, even the ones who laughed will end up listening.